Hey everyone! In this explainer, we're tackling a super interesting question that comes straight from our source material. It's this: why do we condemn some behaviors that have biblical roots, but then turn around and celebrate others? It's a bit of a puzzle, so let's break it down.
And really, this question gets right to the heart of the source's entire argument. It's all about consistency, you know? How does a culture decide, okay, this is a moral failing, but that deserves a public parade? So to really understand where the source is coming from, we have to start with its foundational idea. And that is, throughout human history, and especially in Scripture, sexual behavior and what gets labeled as sin is this incredibly powerful, ever-present, and, often messy theme.
And listen, the source is quick to say this isn't just stuff from thousands of years ago. I mean, think about it. You see it today with things like the kissing cam controversies or when a public figure's career just completely tanks because of an affair. The point is, for certain kinds of sexual behavior, the social and professional fallout is still very, very real.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the real meat of the argument. This is the evidence the source uses to build its case, and it does that by taking us through some major biblical figures to point out what it sees as a clear, repeated pattern of, transgression. You can see the source lays out a pretty clear timeline here. It starts way back in Genesis with Jacob, then moves through 1st and 2nd Samuel with King David, and into 1st Kings with King Solomon. The argument is that these stories all build on a recurring theme, right up until the New Testament, where Jesus' teachings kind of change the game. So let's take a look at each of them.
Okay, but before we jump into those stories, we need to get one key term straight, because it's going to pop up again and again, and that word is polygamy. Pretty simple, it's just the practice of having more than one spouse at the same time. And according to the source, this is absolutely central to the pattern it's about to lay out.
All right, first up, Jacob. The source points out that his family life was, to put it mildly, complex. We're talking multiple wives and multiple concubines. But what's really interesting is how the text sets this up as a direct contrast to his dad, Isaac, who we're told had just one wife. It's a pretty stark difference.
Next, the source really zooms in on King David. And, his story with Bathsheba is pretty infamous. It's laid out here almost like a crime report. Step 1, he commits adultery. Step 2, to cover his tracks, he arranges for her husband to be killed in battle. And step 3, he just takes her as another wife. It's a pretty shocking sequence of events.
And then we get to King Solomon, and his story is presented as maybe the biggest contradiction of all. On the one hand, here's a guy who was literally gifted with incredible wisdom, riches, and honor directly from God. But on the other hand, he completely ignores God's warning and marries all these foreign women, we're talking hundreds of them, which, the story goes, ends up leading him astray into idolatry.
So after looking at all those Old Testament figures, the source makes a huge leap forward into the New Testament, and it lands on this specific quote from Jesus. And the argument here is that this changes everything. The goalposts have completely moved. It's not just about the physical act anymore. Now, just looking at someone with lust is framed as committing adultery in your heart.
Okay, so we've walked through all these biblical case studies of what the source calls sin, and now it makes a really sharp turn. It's about to draw a direct line from all that ancient history to today and compare how we remember those behaviors with how we treat a different one in our modern world. And boom, here it is. This is where the source's whole argument really crystallizes. It puts it all side by side in this table. It says, look, we don't have a Sister Wives Day to celebrate Jacob and Solomon. We don't have an Adultery Day for King David. But then it draws a contrast with Gay Pride Day, framing it as a modern celebration of a behavior that, according to its interpretation, falls into that same biblical category of sin.
Now, the source adds a really crucial bit of nuance here, and it's important to catch. The point it's making is that, we might honor guys like David and Solomon as great leaders, kind of like how we have President's Day, but we absolutely do not create holidays to celebrate their specific actions. We're not celebrating the adultery or the polygamy itself. That's the distinction.
So, after walking us through all of that history and making that modern-day comparison, the source brings it all home with one final, really provocative question.
And that's it. That's the final question the source leaves us chewing on. It's asking about consistency. Why are some historical behaviors that the Bible labels as sin condemned today, while another one is publicly celebrated? It's a challenging thought for sure, and it really forces you to think about how we, as a culture, decide which parts of our history to condemn and which parts to celebrate with a parade.